planning to record.
This meeting is being recorded.
Gosh, sorry, that was so loud. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Amanda Means. I'm the Regional Director of Enrollment Management for Miami Regionals and also the Chair for Ohio Transfer Council's Professional Development and Events Committee. Before we begin, I just wanted to announce a few things for Ohio Transfer Council and then also share a few housekeeping items. Our speaker today, Dr. Kerin Hilker-Balkisson, is going to have a couple of breaks throughout her session to allow for questions. So if you'll plan to mute yourself while she's presenting, we will have a couple of breaks for questions and then also some time for questions at the end. So you can unmute yourself for those questions during those breaks. You can send them to me if you'd like to, Amanda with Ohio Transfer Council, in the private chat or in the group chat, and we can use those during the Q&A at the end as well. I'd also like to announce that we are live with our early bird registration for our annual conference for Ohio Transfer Council. We'll be coming back to Columbus State Community College in June 2nd, Friday, June 2nd, at the beginning of summer. So if you'd like to get that early bird rate, you can go to our website and go ahead and do that. And remember, that does renew your membership for the full year. So you get annual conference registration as well as getting a chance to renew your membership. We'll go ahead and begin. We have started the recording. Again, thank you so much for giving me a few minutes to plug our annual conference and to go over some housekeeping items. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Kerin Hilker-Balkisson, who is coming to us from George Mason University. She is the Director of Educational and Career Pathways at George Mason. Dr. Hilker-Balkisson is an NISTS Transfer Champion Catalyst Award winner and brings over 20 years of experience in engaging PK through 12, community college, university, nonprofit, and workforce sectors to look at inequities and barriers to college access, success, and career attainment. Today, she'll be presenting her topic, Transfer Career Capital, the secret sauce to equitable career outcomes for students who transfer. So we'll go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Hilker-Balkisson. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and just to share a little bit more about my background. I actually have 17 years of community college experience. So I worked at Northern Virginia Community College from 2001 to 2018 prior to coming to George Mason University, and was the founding director of their first Transfer Pathways initiative, Pathway to the Baccalaureate, and now have moved on to George Mason University, where approximately 50% of my position focuses specifically on the transfer pathway, focusing on STEM students. So our conversation today will veer at times to focus specifically on STEM students because the research that was done to support this transfer career capital work did focus on our STEM population, but there are many elements of this work that do align with multiple disciplines and certainly outside of STEM. So I'm really delighted to be here, and we'll go ahead and get started. And just to wake everyone up, we're going to start with a little quiz. Right, my slide not advancing. There we go. So if you could please list in the chat, which of these career competencies, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, do you think is the competency most valued by Google in their hiring process, including hiring their interns? So just go ahead and let me know what you think in the chat. Five, let's see, some 1s and some 5s. So as a supporter of professional skills, I'm glad to see the 1s there. Let's see if anyone else responds. Okay, so in actuality, it's number 2, interpersonal coaching skills are actually the top category that Google is looking for. And that is because many of our Fortune 500 companies, and particularly those that do align with STEM and STEAM professions, they no longer work in hierarchical teams. They now work in cross-collaborative team environments where you have multiple individuals who are of an equivalent level all working together. And so being able to coach others and receive coaching yourself has now really been identified as that top category. Now, all 5 of these are important. These are actually rank ordered by Google, and technical expertise is actually at the bottom. So what many of these organizations have pivoted now to is we can teach you all the tech, all of the, the hands-on, the specific things that you need to know, but we can't teach you to be effective on a team. We can't really teach you those strong communication and listening skills, which is number 2. And then, so you can see here, there's a lot of focus on empathy and, on interpersonal skills. So those soft skills, or as I prefer to call them, 21st century professional skills, have become increasingly important as a part of the hiring process. But we aren't always doing a great job communicating with our students how they express their development of these skills to internship employers or, upon graduation and employment. All right, so I want to start off by introducing, this is a true story of a student that I worked with when I was at Northern Virginia Community College. So we'll call her Natalia. She was a first-generation Latina who participated in a Transfer Pathways initiative. She was a fantastic student who excelled academically. She graduated right on time from her community college and then went right on to George Mason University, graduated with honors. Both institutions went on to receive her master's degree in biotechnology. She was a very hardworking student who balanced her academics with a job at Costco. And she really seemed to be on track to success, getting her associates, her bachelor's, and her master's degree. But about 6 months after she graduated with her master's, she came back to me and shared with me that she was having trouble finding a job, even though there were many programs in place to support equitable hiring. At many STEM organizations, especially in the biotech field, which is very big around the DC metro area where we're located, she really struggled to find full-time employment in her field. And that led me to start to think about why some students like Natalia succeed academically, only to struggle when they're trying to obtain employment, or, I've seen this same issue come up with regard to access to graduate admission. And the more that I've looked into this, I found that, this secret sauce is this transfer career capital. So this is an approach where we're looking at human capital theory and kind of different elements of human capital theory and how they pertain to transfer students, and promote career readiness and attainment. So for those who are not familiar with human capital theory, just going to give you a really quick primer here. So the areas that I'm kind of looking at are social capital and cultural capital. And really what we're looking at here are the relationships, the affiliations, and the networks that individuals have, and the access to resources that come from having those relationships and networks that provide advantages. So looking at social and cultural capital, these obviously do have a profound impact on careers. And so, in the literature, you'll see that there are studies that focus on social and cultural capital and on career capital. And then I've seen several studies, including one recently from some peers of mine and former peers at Nova and George Mason, Nova's Northern Virginia Community College, that focus on transfer student capital. But what I've done is kind of put all of these together to really think about this from the perspective of transfer career capital. So what this relates to is the combined impacts of how much knowledge they have about their academic and their career pathways, not just before they start community college, but at each step of the process, all the way through career placement. Looking at their social support systems. Do they really feel like they belong? We see this a lot with students who come from the community college to our university, which is a Research One institution. And our transfer students often feel very uncomfortable. There's a lot of imposter syndrome that keeps them from accessing opportunities and, pursuing those career development experiences that are really key to being successful. Many of our students also come in without academic and professional networks that are relevant to the career field that they plan to move into. So like in Natalia's case, she continued to work at Costco. She really wasn't cultivating a professional network in biotechnology. And, so we often see this with students, having been a Pell student myself, and, from an immigrant family, I know, for sure that something that's a sure thing, sure income is definitely feels safer. There's a risk aversion involved with, leaving a sure job that gives a steady paycheck to, do something that may often be, underfunded, or sometimes, they expect volunteer or, unpaid internships. So, that creates a real catch-22 for students who really need those financial resources and can't access some of those opportunities. And then, that really ties to their access to, again, those high impact career related experiences, internships, undergraduate research, service learning, whatever it might be. So, the idea behind transfer career capital is that the students who develop this strong capital in this area, they're really focused on developing these networks, these navigational and self-advocacy skills, and who build this sense of belonging, really address that imposter syndrome, are going to demonstrate enhanced readiness for and access to what comes next, whether that be graduate school or whether it be medical school or other, professional training or career attainment in their field. And the data show that there are some really profound impacts for students who have limited transfer career capital. These include delayed career entry. So, like in the case of Natalia, she really labored for 6 months to find employment in her field and could not. Oftentimes there is a lack of knowledge about negotiation that results in lower starting salary offers. And when you start at a lower salary, or, you start your career later, then there's that salary compression. So, obviously as you're getting your step increases and your percentage increases through, the budget cycle, if you start at a low salary, then, that will compound over the course of your career into lower lifetime earnings. It also can affect career advancement. And because, oftentimes students are receiving lower than expected salaries, especially earlier on in their careers, it can pose a challenge to repaying their student loans. So there are many impacts here that affect our students, and in particularly our students who might also be lower income students. So, what we have found is that high impact educational practices, which I'll refer to as HIEP, is really the key to unlocking transfer career capital. So the American Association of Colleges and Universities has this wonderful report that was launched in 2008 that really focuses on breaking down what the different high impact practices are that are really shown to have strong return on investment in retention, in student success, completion, and definitely a tie into career readiness and career attainment as well. So what this report does is very carefully breaks down, these different opportunities, everything from learning communities to internships, and provides concrete strategies for institutions to support students. But, not only the immediate impacts in terms of improved engagement, improved retention, on-time completion, there's definitely a key importance here to make sure that we are not creating an inequitable experience for our underserved and minoritized student groups here, because they often are in a position where they are less likely to engage in high impact educational practices than their peers. So when we think about applying transfer career capital to STEM career attainment, we have to think about in STEM specifically, undergraduate research. So I often hear a lot of folks talk about internships. When I ask my incoming transfer students about how many of them intend to do an internship, a little more than half say that they do. When I ask about undergraduate research, the numbers typically range from 8 to 11% of those students who say that they intend to engage in undergraduate research. But for access to career opportunities in research and development in STEM, and access into graduate programs in STEM that will often utilize multiple research experiences as a key criterion for admission. Also, pre-medical and pre-health professions specifically list undergraduate research as a key criterion. So the fact that only 8 to 11% of our transfer students know that they need to do undergraduate research versus, this being such an important qualification for access to graduate study or to employment, there's a real disconnect that we found. We also found that our students were opting out. Again, this issue of imposter syndrome has become a real issue where our students, even if they know about these opportunities, they don't feel that they are ready for those opportunities yet. So, that has definitely been a challenge for us as well, is how do we engage students and make them feel like they are part of this research community, not just, a part of this, academic community. So I'll stop here really quickly before we move into the next part of the presentation, just to see if anyone has any questions. I'm about to put you all to work again with a.
Yes, feel free to unmute and ask questions if you'd like to, or if you want to direct the questions directly to me in the chat, I'm happy to ask those of Kerin and get those answered. All right. Doesn't look like we've got any right now.
Okay, so we'll keep on going. All right. Okay, and to give you an idea of why it's so important to engage students and appropriately prepare them for what comes next in the process for them, the way that interns are being hired, the hiring process in general has changed very much in the last 15 to 20 years. And so we're seeing much more of a focus on experiential questions, and also questions like this question, which was asked at the 2019 Google College internship call. So there were 500 students who were selected for a first interview. When they got to this question, only 5 students were left after this question was asked of the students. The students had 5 minutes to come up with a pretty concrete answer as to how many doors there are in New York City. This is what's known as a Fermi estimation question. This is, you don't need an exact answer here, but it demonstrates a student's ability to reliably estimate and problem solve creatively. I'm sure there is, of course, a specific answer, but really that's not what Google is looking for here. They're looking for the process. How did a student come up with a response, and did they not panic and, come up with a response, even if it isn't close to necessarily being accurate. So, obviously with a shift to this type of interview question, with this type of interview experience, we have to change how we are preparing students for the career process. Because I know that if, even a few years ago, before I became aware of these questions, if I had seen this question, I would have been completely taken aback by it. So how do we go about finding out this information? So the next part of our presentation is going to focus on the process that we use to complete our needs assessment, and then we will move on to some of the concrete interventions that we've used, and focusing in on one specific intervention that has been extraordinarily successful so far. So what we did for our assessment process is we used design thinking. So design thinking is a 5-stage process to integrate real world information into solving challenges. So this is used, again, very frequently in research and development in STEM fields, because I am embedded within an academic college that is STEM focused. This seemed like a really good mechanism for gaining the information that we needed. And what we did was complete a 4-stage needs assessment. So we reviewed our internal research programs to see what our transfer participation looked like in those. We interviewed our university enrolled transfer students, as well as students who were still at the community college, and we completed faculty and staff interviews at both the community colleges regionally and our local university. So we are now trying to identify what our main issues were and how we could go about solving them. So this occurred back in 2018, and we used 2 guiding questions. And again, thinking specifically about STEM in this case, we wanted to dig into how much knowledge our students and our advisors who are advising those students prior to them transferring into us, how much knowledge they had about the career pathways and the employment expectations, specifically in our field of STEM. And we also wanted to look at how students are getting their information. So if they aren't reaching out to advisors, or if the advisors don't have access to up-to-date information on STEM career pathways, where is that information coming from? And what we found out was that we had some pretty significant issues that we needed to address. So we found that both our students and the community college advisors, which in our state are professional advisors. So again, these aren't STEM professionals. While they had very strong academic transfer knowledge, they really did not feel comfortable providing information to students about more recent innovations and more recent pathways in STEM. So, for example, the difference between computer science and data science, or actuarial science, which is the science of risk management, which is used very much in insurance, and pretty much every major organization now has a risk management office. And what we found was that our students and some of our advisors cited some inaccurate media examples of careers, things that they had seen on TV or in the movies that weren't necessarily accurate as it pertained to those career pathways and how to prepare for them. So, we found that less than 1/3 of our prospective and actively matriculating STEM students identified research as a priority. As I said, when we've done our pre-assessment at our transfer boot camp, we found that only 8 to 11% of the students intended to complete undergraduate research in their first year at our university. And of the students that we spoke with who were university level, we found that many of them became aware that undergraduate research was critical when they were in their 3rd semester with us. So some of them only had 1 or 2 semesters left before they graduated with their bachelor's degree to try to cram in these experiential opportunities, these high impact practices. And that made it much more difficult and put them at a disadvantage because, again, even in holistic admissions, these graduate schools are looking at how many research experiences a student has as one criterion for admission. And then we also looked at our transfer orientation, and although our freshman orientation and onboarding focused a lot more on career readiness, our transfer orientation really skipped over a lot of that and was much more academically focused. So I think there was an expectation that students already had a lot of this information, and we found out later that, you know, they really did not. We also found that there were some significant access, equity, and inclusion barriers. So we found at our institution that most of the undergraduate research positions were never posted. So faculty would reach out to a student who had impressed them in a class and encourage them to opt in to work in their lab as a paid research assistant. So, you know, this obviously puts transfer students at a disadvantage because it takes them a couple of semesters to get to know faculty and to, you know, really integrate to a point where they would be able to be selected for this type of opportunity. We also found that there was some unconscious and some pretty explicit bias as well expressed about transfer academic preparation, which we know the data show very clearly that our transfer students are equally, if not more likely to be successful than native students who started at the university. But, you know, that is the reality of the situation we were working in, is that we did find some faculty who were hesitant to bring on transfer students immediately until they had been on campus for a semester or two. And those who were looking for research had internships had difficulty navigating the process to identify those. A lot of our students did discuss imposter syndrome and opting out, and many of our students felt that the opportunities that were available were inaccessible based on their need to work, their need to care for dependents. You know, they might be student parents or have other responsibilities outside of academics that prevented them from being able to access very traditional timed experiential learning opportunities. So we decided to do something about this. So we started by developing a life cycle process and breaking down how we would support our students over each one of these 5 stages. So from the time that they are matriculated community college students and just thinking about making the jump over to the university, those who are actively in the application process, the transfer transition stage, through their first year of the university, which is where we have really invested a lot of time and energy into supporting our students, and then also continuing university and continuing to provide support after students graduate with their bachelor's degrees. We also identified a 5-pillar transfer intervention framework, and we have focused on systems, collaboration, and change. So working directly with our community colleges to try to address some of these barriers. This has really been the lion's share of the focus, because anything that we can do directly for students, ultimately, it's only going to support the students who opt in and participate in those experiences. Anything that we can do systemically is going to benefit all of our students. So, you know, we definitely want to focus in on that systemic work. But in our student-focused approach, we are looking at addressing each of these 5 pillars and how we support our students. So I'm going to try to send this. This is a pretty extensive document, so it's available in the chat right now. It is our transfer interventions by pillar. So I believe it's 4 pages, and it breaks down through each life cycle stage everything that we are currently doing at the university to try to support our students through those different life cycle stages based on each pillar of service. So I won't go through that entire process or that entire document here. It would just take much too long. But I did want you to have access to that resource because it does go into a lot more detail in terms of what we are doing with our students and how we are supporting them throughout their the entirety of their time with us, from the time they first become known to us as pre-transfer students all the way through post-graduation. Do also want to focus again a little bit more on systemic interventions, because again, this is where you can have the biggest impact in terms of time and just return on investment in general. So, you know, what the university did was took more of my time and shifted it over. You know, a lot of my time had previously been focused on curricular pathways. So working with community colleges on 2+2 initiatives and guided pathways. And, you know, what we found was, you know, there were other resources at the university that could take on some of that work so that my role could shift to focus more specifically on transfer access and success and attainment work. And that I think was a very profound shift, because it allowed us to really dig in and provide some of these interventions and partner with our community colleges in a different way. We also then launched these cross-institutional discussions beyond guided pathways. Where are students, you know, struggling? Where are the gaps here? How can we provide support? How can we inform students? How can we train advisors to know that they need to tell students to prepare for undergraduate research or for career-related experiential learning, you know, in the beginning, so that they know that they need to build this into their time, and we can identify resources and supports for students who maybe have some financial or other barriers that would prevent them from doing this otherwise. So a couple of key things that we have introduced is we now offer collaborative STEM advising, both on campus and virtual. So myself and several of you know, my direct reports will work with faculty advisors and professional advisors at the community college. So we'll either come in and spend a day and meet with students together with the advisor, or we will provide consultation support to advisors who have questions. So this has been tremendously helpful in addressing credit loss issues and making sure that students are on the right track and trajectory for success. We also found that by incorporating these transfer efforts under our diversity, equity, and inclusion goals, just as our university was going through a big DEI investment, opened up some additional resources to us. So we have now started to focus on some of these issues of implicit and explicit bias. We are now requiring that these opportunities for research assistantships be posted in our student hiring system rather than just be by direct referral. You know, so we're starting to look at some of these issues and using data to inform our faculty that, you know, these myths of under preparation of community college students are exactly that. They are myths. And part of the way that we did that was by identifying our transfer champions within all of our departments, and they are the ones who disseminate that data and information so that I can tell every department, you know, how wonderful transfer students are. But if it is their peer, you know, also a fellow astronomy professor, that has a much more profound impact, I think. And then, you know, we definitely have focused a little bit more on building awareness of access barriers to high impact practices. When we looked at our participation numbers for our own internal research programs, we found that the numbers spoke to a really significant disconnect. So we had some of our research programs had 0 transfer students participation or current community college participation. And the highest percentage was 19%. Transfer students comprise 37% of our undergraduate population. So clearly, you know, this is not a representative population. So, you know, making sure that there is awareness that this gap exists, and has led to, I think, a more holistic, equitable approach to selecting participants for these opportunities. All right, so I want to focus a little bit on our key intervention, which is the scientific community of transfer researchers. So, what we're doing here is really leaning into the high impact educational practices and creating a year-long opt-in learning community, non-residential, for our new College of Science transfer students. And what we have done is leveraged 5 of the high impact practices. In our case, our first year seminar and experience, we're focusing on first year transfer, identifying students who have a common interest in research, pulling them together into a learning community so they do take coursework together, as well as attend what we call our STEMinar program. They then engage in a course-based research that leads to a independent research, so either researching on their own or working as a research assistant in a lab. And our course-based research focuses on the Sustainable Development Goals, and so integrating global learning into the overall process of what we're doing. So in just this 1 year experience, we've managed to integrate 5 of these high impact practices. We typically have at this time about 45 students who are engaged in the scientific community of transfer researchers at any one time. We do accept students both in the fall and in the spring semesters, because we enroll transfer students in the fall and in the spring semesters. So we want to make sure that our spring transfers have equal access to the opportunities. Students also receive near-peer mentoring, as well as mentorship from faculty in the department. And then the goal is to help them identify a research mentor as well. So we provide them with navigational support on how to do this, and also to think about what comes next. So we do provide support with students with regard to identifying opportunities for fellowships and paying for graduate school, and making sure that they are on track if they are pre-med or pre-health students, tying them in and linking them with those resources so that they are more likely to identify exactly what they need for the next step and to achieve that. We also do have a direct linkage with our industry mentoring program, placing our transfer students with who intend to go into employment with industry mentors. So, the results, we did have a little bit of a gap in data that occurred during the pandemic, where unfortunately, there were no experiential learning opportunities for a little bit. So we had to put this program on hold for a little while. But what we're finding is that 100% of our cohort 1, and it's currently looking like 100% of our cohort 3, after we got started again, have obtained degree-related experiential learning within 1 year of their transfer. So we have our OSCAR programs, which, if you're familiar with National Science Foundation research experiences for undergraduates, it's kind of built around that same model. We also have other, summer and semester-based programs. We have academic, sorry, I'm not sure why it went ahead. Okay. So we have found that our students are engaging in many of these. They are all in good standing, and then many of them return to serve as near-peer mentors. So, one other thing that we have done to incentivize participation in this program is created a participation scholarship award. So students who complete the program requirements, so they attend 70% of the STEMinars, they enroll in the research, course-based research experience, and they meet one-on-one with me for career planning. Those students are eligible for an academic award. And then if they successfully complete the second semester, they are eligible for a supplemental academic award to serve as a near peer mentor. So there are definitely resources that we have put in as a college to incentivize participation as well. And those awards do vary based on the number of students who qualify, but the minimum award per student for the one semester incentive is $250. And this semester we had, I think we gave $600 scholarships, and then the peer mentors receive $1,000 scholarships. So in terms of lessons learned, where we are so far is it's really important to kind of go beyond those curricular discussions when you're working between community college and university faculty. Through some of our conversations, for example, we found out that we do lab reports differently at the 2-year and the 4-year level, and that some of our students were struggling just because they didn't know how to do a lab report. So we started a boot camp program where one of the components is teaching the students how we do lab reports at George Mason and how that might differ from how they did lab reports at their prior institution. We found that, in terms of swaying faculty, utilizing, those student stories and that quantitative data is really important, particularly when addressing some of that bias with regard to students, that myth of under preparation. We also realized that we needed a specific site. So we have a Blackboard organization that is our home for our sector students, and students can go there, they can access opportunities. The students are cross-posting opportunities that they identify. And we are out looking for those opportunities and posting opportunities in a one-stop place where it's very easy for students to access that information. And that remains available to students even after they have completed the program. We've also found that with our transfer population, hybrid programming is the way to go. We have some students who only engage virtually and others who definitely prefer that face-to-face programming. So that hybrid approach has been successful. We did see continued participation in virtual programming during the pandemic, but we do have some students who really want that face-to-face connection, opportunity to engage and build that true learning community with their peers. So, having that hybrid option has worked well for us. We've also found that scheduling sessions, particularly at the community colleges, information sessions and outreach and visits on campus, that we have to be very careful about our scheduling because we do not run on a common calendar. We have a community college system of 23 community colleges, and then each state university runs independently. So we have different structures, different timing for courses. And, we have found that there are certain sweet spots in terms of time of year and time of day for offering programming, and things that used to work pre-pandemic, like pizza, just don't seem to be such a draw anymore. So, we have to be creative in terms of how we engage participants for programming. And the networking piece is really key. So finding opportunities to integrate teaching networking as a part of the process of supporting transfer students, starting with academic networking, building that academic and faculty network very quickly upon transfer to the university. And then while they're at the university, starting to build and maintain a professional network as well. And that, along with other imposter syndrome focused and identity programming, has been a real key to helping students to feel like they belong and that they should opt into these opportunities. So where we're going next is we are in the process of expanding to more explicitly serve our community colleges, offering webinars, faculty mentoring virtually to all 23 community colleges in our state. as well as expanding our visits to campus. We do have a STEM transfer day. Ours is coming up in 2 weeks, but expanding that to twice a year to engage more institutions and more students. Also, we are in the process, we've actually just received funding to start a Summer Bridge research experience specifically for community college graduates who are going to be coming to our institution. We're very excited about this and looking forward to launching this program very soon. All right, and to wrap up, just in terms of a call to action, some things that community colleges and universities can do. I believe very strongly that universities do have an ethical mandate to better support transfer students. And so, that there is a need to identify opportunities to engage and connect all students with these opportunities and not assume that just because a student came from another college that they have all the same knowledge as a student who started at that institution as a freshman. But I do think that there are also steps that community colleges can take, working with universities to identify 21st century career pathways that are growing and targeting advisor training, informing students early that they need to do more than come to class and leave, that they do need to build in time for that co-curricular development, career development, and if possible, to start to look for those experiences while they are at community college. All right, and we'll go into questions in just 1 second, but I just wanted to tell you what happened to Natalia. I helped her find a position as an adjunct faculty member in the biology department, and we also had at the community college a STEM outreach program, and she started as a part-time employee of that program, eventually moved into full-time employment, and now she teaches middle school life sciences. So STEM education wasn't the field that she had initially intended to pursue, and she readily admits that. She's happy with her career, but she does think about what she could have done had she been able to identify employment opportunities in the tech sector as she had initially intended. All right, and that is a wrap for me. I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Great. Thank you so much for your presentation. I did have one question that came through to me directly, and it really started to touch on a lot of the things that you were talking about at the very end, kind of those calls to actions for community colleges and universities. But the question was, and you're probably going to be elaborating on some things that you did cover, in what ways have you integrated this work with the work of George Mason University and Nova Advance?
With Advance specifically. Okay, yes. So we do work very closely. I work very closely with the director and the Advance team. Although we do not, well, let me stop sharing real quick. We do not work exclusively with Advance because Advance is really only about a few thousand students and is only a portion of our larger transfer population. So, but working specifically with the Advance program, we have worked with that program to do research-focused presentations. So we go out together to the community colleges. We work with our, to identify students in the Advance program, to build research opportunities. Advance now has a research opportunity where students can receive funding to do research. And so I've been engaged in going out and supporting that process as well. And then if students have specific questions about getting engaged, advanced or non-advanced students have questions about getting engaged in university offered programs, I do provide support for that. There are certain programs that are open to advanced students that are not open to non-advanced students. So for those who don't know what Advance is, it is our guided pathways initiative with Northern Virginia Community College. So this is a dual matriculation program. Students do not have to apply for transfer admission. They are seamlessly onboarded to Mason at the time of their advanced declaration. And they have a 4-year degree pathway that is set in stone. So, again, no application, no They just have to meet the milestones of the advanced program to continue. So those students do have access to some additional resources and programming on the campus, and I serve as the point of contact for my academic college in connecting students with research opportunities and other opportunities such as attending events or symposia that would be relevant specifically to STEM.
Great, thank you so much. I have might be a silly question, but what is a near peer mentor versus maybe just what we would think of as a peer mentor?
So a near peer mentor would be a student who is a little bit ahead of the student who, is coming in. So a student who has a lived experience that has surpassed that of the student that they are mentoring. So sometimes you'll see peer mentors will, so for example, when I worked at George Washington University and we had our peer mentoring program, we might have a junior year peer mentor working with a junior year student. In our case, we have our near peer mentors are working with students who are 1 to 2 years behind them in the funnel. So they do have that shared experience and can provide some concrete support and lived experience to share with the students that are coming up behind them.
Great, thank you. Those are all the questions that I had come through the chat. I'm not sure if any of our guests for the webinar, you can raise your hand, or you can just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. Or again, if you'd like to send me that directly in the private chat, I'm happy to ask that on your behalf. I know sometimes we're driving when we're on the call, so sometimes it's easier to let somebody else ask that instead of unmute, but this is a great time. We might have time for 1, maybe 2 questions before we sign off, and we try to keep everything to 1 o'clock so that we keep it to your lunch break. So if there are any other questions, now's a great time.
Don't be shy.
I did have one, just kind of a thought way other people might be thinking of their questions. Looking at like the summer bridge, I'm not sure if you mentioned this and I missed it, but is there a part of maybe a transfer student orientation where this transfer career capital kind of gets embedded? I know that you gave us all those phases and things like that. I'm not sure if the orientation process is a part of this for students.
Yes. So what we have done, so we started a STEM transfer day event. And so this event is open to all of our transfer students, prospective and incoming. The students have an opportunity to attend roundtable sessions where they are engaging directly with faculty from the departments that they're going to be coming into. They not only do a campus tour, but they get to visit labs, they get to interact with transfer students who are at the university, and there's also a transfer student panel. And then there is an experiential learning panel as well. So where we talk about graduate pathways, we talk about health professions, we talk about undergraduate research and internships and all of those components. So students who attend that definitely come out with a really strong understanding of how important experiential learning is to their career trajectory. Then we have a supplement to our standard transfer orientation, which is our transfer boot camp. And so we have started that. And so we cover some more specific content. So for example, those students come out with an understanding of how to write those lab reports, for example, or, generally what the rules are, because the policies for lab safety and whatnot might vary also from institution to institution. And also we found that at many community colleges, the first lab day is sort of like an orientation, and students don't always come dressed up. You're locked out of your lab the first day if you're not in the appropriate attire and shoes and socks and whatnot. So making sure that students really understand those types of expectations. We also cover things like checking your transfer credits to make sure that they're accurate and satisfying all of the correct requirements, and where to get that information, how to register for the next semester, find your advisor. All of those things are gone into more detail during that process. So we do have that. And then that leads right into a transfer welcome event in the first 2 weeks of the semester, where we reiterate some of the content in a more brief format from the boot camp, and then of course the sector program.
Fantastic. We did have another question come in. Are other colleges or areas, maybe not STEM or STEAM, looking to replicate comparable interventions kind of in their own spaces across campus or other colleges?
Well, I was the first the first position of this type that was developed on Mason's campus, but just in the last year, 2 other colleges have hired me's to, folks doing similar work. So now we have representation in our College of Public Health and our School of Business. And we're starting to see more of our colleges and schools taking a look at the work that we're doing. We were the only academic college that did not show a decrease in transfer enrollment during the pandemic. So I think that there is also a strong data argument for making an investment in this work.
Thank you. And then there was one additional question that came through, and it probably our last question before we wrap up. But are there colleagues who assist transfer students who aren't STEM? I know you kind of talked about that. And has Career Services begun to do more kind of related to what you're talking about with transfer?
We have a fantastic Career Services unit that university-wide, so I collaborate closely with them, and they do a lot of work in general. So they do some specific outreach to transfer students. And in my college, I really serve as the conduit for students then to access some of those resources and supports. What we're seeing in other colleges is, the process looks different everywhere at the university, but we do have our success coaches in general at the university. We also utilize a faculty advising model. And so our transfer students come in, they will see a faculty advisor, and then they will be assigned a success coach. So they do have supplemental resources. And if they're in the advanced program, they have an advanced coach also. So, so there are multiple layers of resources. My role serves as just that one additional, we're trying to fill in those cracks that aren't being filled by those other areas.
Great, thank you so much. And that puts us at 1:01. Everyone, thank you so much for joining our Ohio Transfer Council webinar, and a special thank you to Dr. Hilker-Balkisson. We really appreciate you sharing. I think it was a fantastic information for thinking about why we're getting all these transfer students in and they're here at campus, and that career piece is something that usually is not quite at the top of my list, at least for me, when I'm thinking about our transfer students. So thank you so much for joining and sharing those processes and the document that we can review. Again, we did record our webinar, so folks will have this posted on our Ohio Transfer Council website. And just one other reminder, again, our early bird registration for annual conference is open, and our conference will be back at Columbus State Community College on Friday, June 2nd. So we hope we'll get to see you there soon. Again, thank you so much, and everyone have a fantastic day and a great weekend. Thanks for joining Ohio Transfer Council during your lunch break. Thanks so much, Dr. Hilker-Balkisson. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. So thank you all.
Thanks so much. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks.